Fiona, as an accountant, you're obviously going to tell me that I need to employ your services to fill in the self-assessment tax return form.
Yes.
But what does an accountant do then? How do they really help?
Okay, well, firstly, they're experts in their field. We have to spend hours keeping abreast of the tax regulations and the accountancy rules, so that we can advise you as to how they should be best applied. So, for example, if you made a loss in previous years, you can carry that forward against your tax bill in later years. There may be also certain circumstances when you can claim it against other income. So that's very important. The other area are capital allowances, for example, and what sort of allowances you can claim on plant and machinery, even on fixtures and fittings in buildings, that sort of thing. Business expenses and what's allowable and what isn't allowable.
So it sounds to me that once you've got a good accountant, you'd want to try and keep them, obviously, but the accountant sort of would help from one year to the next. Am I right in thinking that?
Yes, that's right.
Continuity.
Yes, it's important not to... I mean, I understand the reasons why people do change their accountants, but you need to bear in mind that there's a certain history that needs to transfer from one accountant to the other in order for the next accountant to do their job. So if you chop and change too often, you may not get the service that you might want.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about costs. I don't want to press you on exactly how much, because it will vary clearly. But to employ an accountant as someone needing their self-assessment tax return form filled in only, what sort of cost typically would that be? What would I look at?
Right. Well, if it's just an individual who just wants a straightforward return completed, it will depend on the number of sections within that return. So it could be anything from £120 upwards, depending. If, for example, the person runs a business, so they're a sole trader or a partnership, then obviously there's going to be more work involved, because you have to prepare a set of accounts, and it will depend on how many transactions there are. So that could be anything from £350 upwards to about £500. If, say, for example, they're a partnership, then there are more tax returns to be prepared, because you have to prepare one tax return for each of the partners and one for the partnership as a whole.
So it's more complex.
It's more complex, and so that could start at around £800 upwards.
Okay.
If we're talking about limited companies, that could be £1,200 upwards, depending on the size of the company. So it varies
very much on the complexity. Is there anything that business owners can do to actually make life easy for them and for the accountant?
Well, yes, certainly, because it becomes more expensive from the accountancy bill point of view. The more complex you make it for them. So, for example, if you're nice and organised when you walk through the door and present your information to the accountant, then it's going to keep your bill down. When I say organised, I don't mean do the job for them. What I'm saying is that if you walk through the door with a carrier bag stuffed full of paperwork that's in no particular order, it's obviously going to take time for the accountant to sort that paperwork out into sales invoices, purchase invoices and bank statements, for example. Another tip is, if you're going to bring in bank statements, just double check that all of the bank statements are there, because otherwise it's going to take time for the accountant to work through the bank statements, realise some are missing. Then they're going to have to come back to you and say, I'm missing this amount of information. So it helps to keep your bill down if
you're more organised.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely.
Okay. And presumably as you go through the year as well, don't just keep that pile to yourself in a cupboard. Yes. I am saying that, of course, because mine is perfectly organised.
Of course.
Of course it is. Fiona, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Thanks very much for your input and your expertise as well. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alan. Thanks.